Lawyer to Legal Tech Founder with Curtis Wadsworth, episode 126. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another amazing guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and my guest today is Curtis Wadsworth. Curtis is a PhD biochemist and patent lawyer. He teamed up with Carnegie Mellon University distinguished career professor and patent lawyer Mike Shamus to build a cost-effective and reliable patent search platform, founding the company DorothyAI, with the goal of turning their years of struggle using conventional platforms and outsourced patent search to find relevant patent information into an easy-to-use, accurate, and cost-effective patent search platform. I'm really excited to have Curtis here with me today. I loved my initial conversation with him, what they're up to and doing at DorothyAI. I can't wait to jump in and talk about his past, his future, what the story is with this DorothyAI. What is it? Who's it for? And really dive into that. I think you guys are going to love it because Curtis is just one of those people who's just charismatic, enjoyable to listen to and have a conversation with. Now, unfortunately for you, I'm the one having the conversation, not you, but you get to listen in to our discussion, which we're going to jump into in just a moment. But for those of you who are new to the show, I just want to encourage you to hit the subscribe button if you like the show. If you enjoy it, you want to hear more of it, we're here twice a week. Every Tuesday, it's just me coming at you with great stuff, hopefully. I hope it's great. I believe it's great. My people tell me it's great, but it's up to you to decide that. And then Thursday, we do interviews style episodes, and we have great guests here on the show. You can go back and listen to over a year's worth of guest interviews at this point. And I couldn't be prouder of what we've produced. We just constantly uncovering gold mines of information for you from our really knowledgeable guest experts. So you definitely want to hit that subscribe button to join the show. If you haven't yet given us a rating and review, we'd love that too. You can rate and review the show right in your podcast player. Just click to write a review. Give us as many stars as you like. We really appreciate 5 of them, but you give as many stars as you feel comfortable, and write something for the next person, the person who's reading the review, the person who wants to know, should I listen to this show? If you like it, leave some breadcrumbs for them so that they hit the play button as well. Last announcement before I jump into this interview. Here at Profit with Law, we offer a free coaching session. That is a one-on-one session with me where we dive into your law firm and what might be keeping you from your goals. If you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling like you're not making traction where you need to, and you want to help get clarity on how to move forward, you definitely want to get on the phone with me. Now, we only do a number of these a month. And I can tell you coming into well, actually, I don't know when this is going to be produced. But I believe it'll come out sometime in August. I'm going to be away for a week in August, and then going into September, school starts. My calendar is going to be even more limited. So you want to jump in, grab one of those spots while you can. And you could do that at profitwithlaw.com/free coaching. profitwithlaw.com/free coaching. Curtis, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So what I like to do when we start an interview is just to let people know who you are. So if you can just take a moment and tell us your entire life in like 3 minutes. No, I'm just, give us the broad strokes of, how did you come about to become a lawyer, and how did a lawyer end up in what seems like a tech startup? And did you give up law to do this? Give us the lay of the land of how this all came about.
Okay. So I'm a PhD biochemist. When I graduated, I left science for a little while. I did some political work and some other stuff, fundraising, and it was kind of a disaster, but it was fun. And I decided I wanted to get back into science. So I had a friend at the time who was going through law school. He's like, you should look at patent law. So I reached out to my network and found Ray Miller at Pepper Hamilton, talked to him. He needed a patent agent at the time, told me if I could pass the patent bar, he would hire me. So I went home, took the patent bar a couple months later, passed it, and then started working at Pepper for Ray Miller. So I spent 12 years there. In that time, I went to law school. I ended up going to law school full time and effectively working full time, which was also a complete disaster, but somehow made it through. And then I got to the point where I was at Pepper and looking at becoming a partner and deciding whether or not that's what I wanted to do. I ended up leaving Pepper and starting my own firm, 310 Consulting, which was focused specifically on startups and small businesses. Because I saw that as an area that really kind of needed some help from an IP perspective. So I jumped in there, started building client base. And during the course of doing that, I met Mike Shamus, who, as you said, is a distinguished career professor in the Language Technology Institute at Pepper Hamilton. At Carnegie Mellon University. And he's also a patent lawyer. So we had a lot in common. We got coffee a couple of times and just, kind of shared war stories. One of the reoccurring themes that came up was patent searching, because I see that as a real centerpiece of my practice. I just like to get a lay of the land and understand how my clients' inventions kind of fit in the broader landscape and what other companies and inventors are doing in that area. Mike was working a lot as an expert witness, so he was also doing a lot of patent searching. We both saw kind of the issues that we were running into with commercially available products, and he had a lot of ideas for ways to make it easier. So we took a couple of those, handed that off to one of his capstone teams for masters in, I forget what the actual program was, but these are like people who have been working as developers for a long time and coming back to get a master's degree. Gave that project to him with the idea, either they get it to work by the end of the summer or they don't. They got it to work, and it actually worked pretty well. So we built that into a company, hired a CTO. We just hired a chief growth officer to kind of head sales, and we're moving forward. So it's pretty exciting. But our main goals were really to make something that was easy to use, that fit within the workflow of the patent lawyer. So, it becomes your sidekick per se.
Yeah, really, really interesting story. And we're going to dive into some details about DorothyAI in a little while, but I want to stay on your story for a moment and just get to dig into that. First of all, how does a biochemist get some desire to go and become a lawyer? Like people ask me, because I went from IT to accounting. So they ask me a similar type of question. Usually people go from accounting to IT. Like there's not usually, you don't usually go from an exciting career in IT to a dull career in accounting, but biochemist, lawyer, they don't seem to have parallels. Like just how does that happen?
So it is kind of interesting, but it works very well for me, right? So I'm just a very kind of curious, and I love to learn new things. So as a graduate student, you're focused on one problem, and that's your entire world, is this one problem and how to solve it. And I was looking for a way to kind of broaden out the sorts of science that I was in touch with. And patent law is a really great way to do that, right? So I'm having conversations with people as their patent lawyer that I would never have as another scientist. About what they're actually doing and really kind of getting into the weeds of the technology. And that to me is super exciting. So it just really worked out well for me. It was a great choice.
Yeah, when you lay it out that way, it does sound super exciting. I kind of am a little bit jealous that I'm not having these conversations with people about the stuff that they're doing. We actually had a guest here on the episode, and most episodes I can pull off the top of my head and at least tell you what the person's name is, but this is a long time ago, and I'm forgetting right now. But we will link it up in the show notes. I had a guest here on the episode, also an attorney, also got into. He didn't get into a startup to help attorneys. He actually got into a different type of thing, but he got into a startup that does wearables. So they basically were working on some advanced sensors that can sense from the skin, from the perspiration on the skin, certain things. So they were working on like a diabetes sensor, different things like that, where they can create a wearable that would help somebody, with a medical issue. Very interesting conversation that we had. And this is kind of along those lines. It's like, really different and out there from the norm. You don't usually get people becoming patent lawyers to get access to more science,
Right.
So it's a very interesting concept, and glad it worked out for you. I mean, it's hearing people's stories and how they got to where they are is really, really cool. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. And
I kind of feel bad for people. Oh, I'm sorry. I kind of feel bad for people that don't have that kind of excitement about it. And that's one of the reasons I like working with startups, right? Is that everybody you talk to about the technology is super excited. And you kind of feed off of it. So I want to do a better job for them because I'm as excited as they are about what they're doing. It's a lot of fun. So, no, sorry.
That's okay. So there are actually a number of attorneys who sit there wondering if maybe they have an idea, if they should act on it, if they should do something about it, and then they're grappling with this. Oh, but I'm an attorney, and this is what I do. You seem to be navigating two different things, right? You have your law practice. You're continuing to do that, and at the same time, you're kind of running this other organization. What do you have to say to somebody who's sitting there with an idea and wondering whether or not they should take a stab at it? What is that like? And is it something you recommend, or is it not for the faint of heart kind of thing?
Well, it's not for the faint of heart, especially if you really start building a company, because it's a lot of work. And I basically put everything I have into it. So it's risky at the same time. But at the same time, it's exciting. And honestly, I think if you do have an idea, particularly in the legal space, and you're a lawyer, because I think that's one of the things that legal tech has kind of a issue with, is a lot of people that are designing the products aren't lawyers, and they don't really understand the problem at kind of the level that you need to understand it to really solve it. I tell them, go for it. Find somebody who is an expert in that area and just start working with them. Tell them the problem, get them excited about it, and see what happens. Because you never know. I mean, it could be something that really blows up and becomes awesome, or it could just make your practice run more smoothly, which, is also great.
Now, what about funding the company? So you said you put everything you have into it. I imagine you're talking about, sinking your finances into it. I imagine that your partner put his money behind it too. But besides for the two of you, did you seek investors? Did you, how did you come up with the capital necessary to get this thing off the ground? I know you got the free labor of the college students at the beginning, but once you have a product and you're bringing it to market, there's a ton of other expenses as well. And it can't be cheap. And I don't know, like, even if you start getting clients, it takes a while until you're profitable and making money. So we can't ignore the fact that it takes money to make money. So I'm just curious what you had to do to navigate that part of it.
In some ways I lucked out. So one of the things that I did is I joined the Founder Institute, which is an accelerator that gives you kind of the background on how to start a startup. Basically, they take it from an idea stage to a kind of beginning company. And during that process, I worked a lot on the business plan and value proposition and that sort of thing. And I have a very good friend who is the HBS grad. So during the process of building that business plan, I just, sent him an email. I'm like, hey, Brian, do you mind, taking a look at this and kind of helping me out? And he did. So we spent a lot of time on the phone just kind of going back and forth. And he became, I think, more excited about the the product and the prospect of really kind of changing the way people are doing these patent searches and improving patent law to some extent, but also a way to make something that's really building a company. Because I think he kind of got into business school with that idea, ended up doing much more of the investing and that sort of thing, and not as much company building. And it's always something he wanted to do. So he and I have really kind of gone through the process together. But we've been lucky because we've been able to use his network to also fund the company. So we just closed a relatively big round about 2 months ago. It was about a month after all the quarantine and shutdown stuff. So we had the worst possible timing to start a fundraising campaign. So we had a bunch of people interested, and then everything shut down and they just disappeared. So we managed to get a couple of individual investors that wanted in, and we're going from there.
Awesome. Very interesting. What I find interesting, and I'm not going to make an accusation without actually asking you, but and you're not on fire here either, but creating a business plan for this company, right? You can't operate without it, right? You really need to know where you're going. You need to know what kind of investment you need. You need to know at what point you're going to run out of money if you don't get the capital you need. When you started your law practice, did you go through this business planning process, or you just kind of like hang up a shingle and, try to find clients?
I did not go through the business plan process. And honestly, that was a huge mistake, but I managed to kind of struggle through.
Yeah. And the reason I ask you, and I knew that was going to be the answer, because there's not very many lawyers who do go through that process. But it's interesting that maybe you didn't know intellectually you needed to do it. Maybe the fact that you were in this, incubator company, or maybe your interaction with Mike Seamus, or, stuff like that, or your other friend, I forgot his name, the investment buddy, but maybe there, that was influenced in that process. But one of the pet peeves that I have with the legal industry, and this is not, and I'm not calling anybody out on the carpet. It's just, you don't know what you don't know. And we don't recognize the value of, and I'm not talking about creating a formal business plan that you can present to investors, but the value of mapping out what you want to achieve and how you're going to get there and what it's going to take to get there before you start. And if you haven't done it before you start, it's not too late. Like we run a program called the 90-Day Law Firm Turnaround. It's a group coaching program, and we take you through a process over 90 days to completely change the trajectory of your firm. And one of the things that we do is we help you walk through that process of creating that plan of where you want to go and how you're going to get there. And believe it or not, people struggle for years and just don't recognize that, hey, if I just had $50,000 in the bank, I'd be comfortable hiring that employee that I know I need, but I'm afraid to hire. And that would change everything for me. Yet I'm not willing to look for a source of that 50 grand because I never realized that that's all it took, Yeah. And to think that, investing in a company when you want to start, you're an entrepreneur, you're starting a business. If you were to open a McDonald's franchise, it would cost you $750,000 to open, and you'd have to borrow most of that. Most people don't have that in the bank, yet you can still become a franchise owner of a McDonald's. All you got to do is find the capital somewhere, which is usually a loan from the SBA or from family members or things like that. So going into it, starting a law firm, running a law firm, not recognizing that you need to have capital in some way to fuel the growth of the firm. No wonder people take years to get that growth instead of the instant. I'm not going to say instant success. Nothing is instant, but it could be way faster, way easier if we just sat there and created a plan. So I love that, we're having this conversation and we're able to look at both sides of it, because it highlights what is obvious in one industry, because there's no way to start a software company without having capital. And the traditional route is to go and get investors. Doesn't have to be that way. You can borrow money. I know it's harder with a law firm to go and get investors. It's a no-no in most areas, which is another problem, which we can talk about on a different podcast episode. But you definitely have access to borrow funds, and you can get creative. You have family members who have money that's tied up in a retirement account that's doing not very little for them, and they can turn around and put in a self-directed and create a loan for you. You go to the SBA. There's a lot of different options to just propel that initial growth that you need and move forward. So I'm going to turn the mic back over to you. Any thoughts on this specific point?
No, I completely agree. And it's really interesting because where I've run into lots of the path has become bumpy in the legal side of my business. Because of what I've learned doing that and not doing that on the software side, it's run much more smoothly. And what I've learned running the software company and applying that to the legal business has made things much easier. And a lot of that does come from the business plan. And like you said, really kind of finding out what your options are. Because when I started, I didn't really know. So I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to build a website, start passing out cards and see what happens, which is a horrible way to start a business.
Right.
It's kind of a miracle that it worked. But now having done a lot of that, knowing that, for example, I got an SBA line of credit for the legal side of business just to make sure that I had that backup if I ever needed it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it turns out during the COVID downturn, I definitely needed it. So that was something that, I talked to a business banker at PNC, Rich Lovely. He helped me out with those kind of options and, set me on the right track. And that's become a very important relationship, and it's been very helpful. So I think really kind of putting that thought into it in the beginning, or wherever you are in your law practice, will be helpful and beneficial. And in a couple of months, you'll definitely see you'll be less stressed.
Yeah, it's amazing what having a line of credit or something like that available to you can do just to smooth out the bumps in the road. Nobody has the same amount of revenue coming in month after month. It's the consistency and predictability is not going to be perfect, even if you got a great system in place. So having something to smooth it out where a month, 1 month, maybe you're not covering completely with the cash coming in, and the next month you're very flush. You have something to lean on, and you're not stuck trying to figure out how am I going to, rob Peter to pay Paul. I have no idea where that line came from, by the way, but it's, I've heard it a lot growing up. So we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. But I'll tell you that the way that I got involved in the legal industry with getting, serving law firms is I got a handful of law firms as clients in the accounting side of my business. One referred the next, and they all had one similar thing going. They all looked very successful on the front end. Beautiful office, staff, clients. It looked like a well-operating machine. And then on the back end, the owner is transferring personal funds in and out of the company to cover payroll. And that was a real eye-opener to me to say, hey, look, here's an industry that really needs help. They need a better understanding of what it means to be a business owner, what it means to understand cash flow, to predict cash flow, to manage it, to understand where, debt or capital fits in. And that's how I got started as, with Profit with Law, with the podcast, and just being out here serving the legal community. Because the biggest thing that you all say is, they don't teach this in law school, right? And you wouldn't be wrong, right? They do not teach business and how to run a law firm in law school. And it's almost criminal that they don't. But the reality is that would you rather, listen to this podcast, dial into an education community where you can learn it, and become better at it? Or would you like to just continue the school of hard knocks and keep learning by by making errors along the way and figuring it out? 20 years into the journey, you probably will be much smarter and be able to do a much better job at the next go around. But we're trying to help you get there the first time. So just awesome stuff. I love looking at these parallels and being able to highlight and show what they look like. So let's switch gears here. Let's jump into DorothyAI. It sounds like the company is rocking and rolling. You got the growth person you hired. You got a CTO. You're flushing out your management team and building them out. Where is the software stand? Is it market ready? Is it already? You already have taking on customers, and what has the initial feedback been?
So we launched a beta version back in September of last year to about 45 beta users. About 30 of those have been active throughout the time period, and we've taken a lot of their feedback and built that into the new version. So we've launched what we call version 1 back in February. We started looking for sales then. Some of the feedback we got, we needed more international data and that sort of thing. So we built that into the product, and that's actually launching this week with enhanced ability to look at figures and other things like that. We've brought the data down into families and other things that are super important to patent lawyers that most other people are going to be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. We really built that in, and now we are seriously looking looking to build out our customer base. So we have a few customers right now, but we are still looking for that kind of first firm to really take the leap and go with us. So if you're listening and you're that firm, give me a call.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's clarify for those people who are not patent lawyers, and for those who are patent lawyers that that would be interested in the product. What does DorothyAI do? I know we touched on the fact that it helps with patent search, but we didn't really dive into what it does. So what does it do? Why is it better than what's being done today for the same problem? And why is it like a no-brainer for somebody who's a patent lawyer to say, hey, let me give this thing a try?
Right. So the way we built the user interface, it has 2 query boxes. A big query box where you just put a complete description of the thing that you're searching for. So whatever invention your client sends you, you can cut and paste their description and stick it directly in that text box. We also have a query for the novel feature. So once you've looked through it and you identify what you think the novel feature is, if there are a couple of novel features in there, you may have to run a couple of different searches, but you put that novel feature in the novel feature box, and then effectively hit search, and we'll perform the search. So we weigh the novel feature versus the complete description of the invention to find the references that are most relevant to that actual query. So to my mind, the novel feature is the real kind of jump in technology. Even though it seems relatively simple, it makes a big difference in the results that you get back. The other thing that we're doing is we've moved almost the entire search process to the back end, so you don't need a lot of user interaction. We classify the query into a CPC section, and then we use that as a weighing factor in the results that you get back. We synonymize any of the technological terms in there based on the source that we've created by indexing the entire patent database. So it's completely up to date and includes probably more synonyms than it needs, but we want to make sure that we're covering everything. And then we worked very hard to determine a way to gauge relevancy. So you get an actual relevancy score when you see the return results. So it's sorted by relevancy, it searches everything, and then on top of that, we've made it easy to save the references that are important. You just click a button and save it to a project, and then you can go through that project. We're going to release an IDS, information disclosure statement, support or export. So basically, once you have a project with a bunch of patent references in there. You click a button and you get your information disclosure statement as the PDF out. So then it's just a matter of filing it. So if you're doing an initial search, super easy. If you want to do a knockout search for some sort of invention that you have or that your client has sent you, you can do that within 20 minutes is our goal. And it just makes things go easier, more quickly. A lot of those searches now are being carried out by outsourcers. So you would send that invention disclosure to project manager. A team of people would perform the search and identify what they think are the most relevant references, and then they would send that back to you in an Excel file. You then would have to kind of go through the Excel file and make sure that what they identified was, in fact relevant. Sometimes they're not, because they're not really experts in those areas, and other issues with the outsourced searching. But it's pretty expensive. It takes, between 3 days and a week typically to get those sorts of results back. So we're shortening the time, making it cheaper, and just making your life easier.
So what when you send this to an outsourcer, are they doing all this work manually?
Yes. Yeah.
So wouldn't they be a good target client for the software?
Yeah, they are, but I prefer to help the patent lawyers do that, because they're not going to change their prices, right?
Right.
So if we can save, so our per seat price is around $200 a month. So if you have an active practice where you're sending out, even 3 or 4 of these that each cost between $300 and $500, you're saving, $1,000 at least every month. So let's make
it's not just the savings and the expense, right? I imagine that this expense is passed on to the client.
Yep.
So if you can keep the expense you're passing on to the client where it is, then you're increasing your profitability on that piece of the puzzle. But more importantly, it's the time frame, right? The quick turnaround, being in control, not relying on somebody else. So that you can just get it done quickly and efficiently and with your understanding. So you can, you're doing the filtering process. So you don't have to do that again when it comes back from the outside contractor that you normally would go to.
That's right.
So it's just a very interesting and unique idea of how to make something easier, better using technology, and I'm a huge proponent of using tech to cut out the manual stuff that's happening. So whether it's your own staff, speeding up your own staff, or just improving the customer experience, and it also alleviates errors, right? And software just does a better job. I imagine that doing these patent searches, these outside companies sometimes miss things as well, right? And I don't know.
Yeah.
You'd have to tell me if that's correct. But I can't imagine that when a human is doing it, if they didn't think of the right words to put in or the right thing to look for, or look in the right place, then they can miss something where maybe somebody else already has. I'm assuming the patent search to make sure that nobody else has a patent on something that's similar. So, what if one of these things is missed and somebody made a mistake? I mean, that could be an eventual lawsuit down the road, right? So,
absolutely.
Using software that's not going to forget to check certain databases. It's not going to, put the wrong things in. It's just going to take your input, run your searches, and give you an output. So,
we actually have a big project working right now for that very thing, freedom to operate searches, because those are very high value searches that, those an outsourcer typically charge between $7,000 and $10,000.
Mm-hmm.
And, we'll be able to do it in 20 minutes as well as they do, at a much lower cost. So that's exactly where we're going. And we built in a lot of enhancements to the user interface just to make it. One of the things I hate about commercial software is they all look like they were designed in the 80s.
Right.
Just like check boxes and, radio buttons, and it's a disaster. So
not
we've really
a good
worked
GUI,
on the design.
right?
Yeah, exactly. And then also the ability to keep everything within the firm. So rather than having to send emails out, we're building in sharing functions. So you can share your project with your client. Another big security concern I have is you're taking your client's secret and then sending it off to an outsourcer, right, who is under a very flimsy non-disclosure agreement if there's anything built into that. And you don't know who is actually going to be reading that because you've never met any of those searchers.
Right.
So that becomes a huge concern in my mind anyway.
Right.
So we're alleviating all of that.
Very, very interesting. Quite a compelling sales pitch you can have with all this stuff. You know, I know that your intention is to help patent attorneys, and I know that you will. But I wonder if getting some of these outsourcers as clients will give you more of a sales pitch. You know, use the software that the outsourcers are using and cut out the middleman. You know?
Yeah, it's something we've considered. I don't know. We spent a lot of time dealing with outsourcers, and I'd rather help the patent lawyers. So
right. Well, you know, like we said at the beginning, it's a business, right? And you gotta serve the marketplace wherever that is. But anyway, I'm just curious to see how that plays out. But it's exciting to talk to somebody who's at the early stages of a piece of software that could be really cool for a piece of the legal industry. Obviously, this is very specific to patent attorneys. Do you see any value in the technology that you're building for any other practice area eventually? Do you think that this search capability that you're building out might be something that can grow beyond patent search?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, so right now we're running 6 separate search models on each query. So it's basically like running it through 6 different search engines at the same time. And those are all applicable to any type of search. So eventually we're looking at, moving potentially into the academic area where, academics spend massive amounts of time looking for relevant references. In that context, it's more of the academic literature than it is patents, but just massive amounts of time looking for things. And if we can shorten that time, it'll make them more productive as well.
Right.
So that's kind of where we'd like to grow, is just more into finding scientific information. But patent lawyers are a good place to start. A, because I'm a patent lawyer and we already had some connections there, and B, because they're hard on the tech that they use. So we get a lot of feedback.
Yeah, it's also easier to sell something to somebody who has a real return on investment in a real business, as opposed to in education, where you're just saving them time and you're basically relying on them, coming up with a grant for it or getting the funds for it somewhere in the budget. You have less control in the sales process there, and it takes breaking into a couple of large institutions where then you could say, hey, they're a client. Oh, really? Okay, I got to be a client too, kind of thing. So, yeah, it makes sense to start exactly where you are. But I love just getting that insight into where you're going. So, what haven't I asked you about DorothyAI that you would love to make sure that our audience hears about today?
So, the biggest concern we hear is whether it works. And we've done a lot of testing, so we definitely know it works. And in all honesty, I actually did a search yesterday for a client that I have now and found a competitor that we have an earlier filing date by like a month. So it's one of those things where it's kind of changing our strategy with his portfolio, just because we know that somebody is, pursuing something similar. They have a lot more money backing them up. So, I mean, it's a good way to find somebody, a potential licensee. So I don't know. I was just pretty excited yesterday. So I don't know. I thought I would share that story. Hopefully it makes sense to somebody out there.
Yeah, it didn't make sense to me. So hopefully it'll make sense to somebody else. And it sounded to me like you found that there's somebody who's doing the same thing that you're doing. And that's a good thing somehow. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, so basically what we can do is take that. Well, this is for another client, right? So it's not me personally, but yeah, so we can take that information. We know where they're going. They have a product that's actually moving through the FDA that would infringe his patent that was filed earlier. So now we can put ourselves effectively in their way.
got it.
Then they have to license our patent in order to sell their
continue
product.
to move forward.
Right. So yeah, it's kind of a big thing.
Right.
Especially when you're an early stage startup with, limited funds and that sort of thing. It's good to have that information.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that now that I understand it, it's definitely exciting, for sure. So what you can do with this is pretty amazing, and really just getting an insight into the journey that you've taken to get to where you are today, with the software and creating it and running a law firm at the same time. Is to me is is the more amazing part. Not to discount where DorothyAI is in the process. I'd love to see how it does and if it takes off. What's the potential market? How many patent attorneys are out there, that could be using this software?
So there are about 33,000 to 45, somewhere in that area, patent lawyers in the U.S. But our goal is to move internationally relatively quickly, which just opens that wide up, or opens that much wider. And then also looking at R&D at big companies. Most of the big companies that I've worked with either have professional searchers that do nothing but search inventions that the company is generating through their R&D, or they outsource to a law firm to perform those knockout searches. So being able to, one of our goals is really to kind of strengthen that relationship between those sorts of companies and the law firm by making communication between them much more fluid. Building data rooms and things like that, so that everybody has all the information all the time. All the notes are memorialized and all in one place, so you don't lose that information because it's in an email that you can't find because it's stored with 1,000 other emails, that sort of stuff. So I think it's it will be a very valuable tool throughout the entire industry. Anybody that's patenting should probably give me a call.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you and if you're not comfortable sharing this on air, just say, hey, that's proprietary information. What are your goals for, like, you're trying to get? It's version 1 now that you're selling, or version 2? I forgot.
It's kind of a version 1.2.
Got it. Okay, so you're version 1.2. You're trying to go and get your first clients after beta, right? Mm-hmm. What's your goal? How many licenses do you want to have sold, say, over the next 6 months?
Well, over the next 6 months, would like to get, between 50 and 100. Mm-hmm. So we know that the sales process is going to be long, and we know that there are going to be a lot of kind of hurdles that we have to go through from a sales cycle perspective, pen testing and other things like that. So, and we're ready for that. We put a lot of effort into security and that sort of thing, because that's something I take incredibly seriously in my own life. And then build from there. So within the next 5 years, would like to be around 3,000 to 5,000 users. Again, kind of assuming that it's going to take some time to get there. And then we'll start launching internationally and really start hopefully ramping up from there.
Yeah, it definitely. You got to start somewhere, and I think that your numbers sound really realistic. The nice small numbers, and over the next 6 months, and then scaling up from there. and that's just, 3,000 users. That's just 10% of the market here in the US, and you're going to be international. So just a very small slice of the market. I wonder if your potential is bigger than that. We'll have to come and revisit in a couple of years to see how it's going, right?
I honestly think it is, but we just got to get there. So I'm trying to stay realistic. And a lot of those numbers are built on, what do we need to do in order to continue to build the product the way we want to without bringing on more outside investment. Mm-hmm. So, we can keep the price relatively low, and we can not need to get more investment, and we can still do all the stuff we want to do. So that's our overall goal.
Awesome. All right. Well, this has been a fun conversation for sure. Different. And I love what you're building with DorothyAI. I love seeing a law firm owner step into the shoes of a true entrepreneur by adding another business. It's got great potential. You're solving a pain point. You knew that was a pain point. How many of us go through day to day, notice an opportunity, but don't actually do anything about it. And you are doing something about it, which is really commendable. It's something to look up to you for. And I'm sure that there are people who are going to be like, hey, I would love to have a conversation with this guy, Curtis, who is on the Profit with Law podcast. So where do people go from here? How do they find out more about your product? How do they get in touch with you? What's the next step for somebody who's interested in checking out more of this, in either direction here? How do they go take that next step?
Well, you can head to www.DorothyAI.com. That's our main website. You can reach out to me, curt@DorothyAI.com. We also just released a white paper about the cost of outsourcing patent search. So if you're interested in that, I have a website, which I think will be linked with the
It'll be linked in the show notes for sure.
Awesome. Yeah. So click on that link and learn more about.
Is that hub.dorothyai.com/outsource? Is that the one?
That's the one. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So
I knew I should have written it down.
Give it to you verbally here as well. It's hub.dorothyai.com/outsource. In case you're not in front of our show notes and you want to just write it down or go there now. I don't know if you link to that white paper somewhere on the website as well. DorothyAI.com is the website for DorothyAI. And Curt is CURT@DorothyAI.com. Curtis, it's been a real pleasure having you here.
It's been great. Thank you.
And I hope to see that, that you move forward in a big way with this and you're really successful. So I'd love to check back in with you at some point and revisit so that our audience can see the journey that you're taking, not just the one inside look right at this moment in time that we're having this conversation. And for those of you who don't know, if you're not watching this on video, you're listening to the audio podcast. Curtis has this thing behind him on the wall that caught my attention right away, and it sticks out to me. It's going to make him forever memorable. He's got a sheet of Monopoly $500 bills, uncut, hanging on the wall behind him. Where'd you get that?
I honestly don't remember. I saw it on the internet somewhere. I think it was like a pop-up on Facebook or something. I was just like, oh, that's something I need. So
it's amazing what people will make and advertise and sell out there. So but yeah, it's really cool. I kind of need to get one of those myself. Thank
you.
It's been great. Thank you so much. Thank you for being so upfront, honest, and forthcoming with everything that's going on, and not dodging any of the questions. I think that it's helpful to people to really get the full scoop, and it's been a great conversation. So thank you, and folks.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
You're welcome. Folks, if this is your first time listening, you have not hit the subscribe button to the show, please do so now so that you can catch the next episode. Your podcast player will let you know that we've released it. We're here every Tuesday and Thursday with a great new episode coming your way. And we are, the Profit with Law podcast is growing by leaps and bounds, and we've just it's watching the acceleration of growth and the number of people listening to the show has just been outstanding and mind-boggling to watch. When I first released the episode, I was like, you know what? In the first month, I want to have 5,000 downloads. It took us 4 months to get to there. And now I don't know when we're listening to this, but in the beginning of July, we crossed 20,000 downloads. And to put it in context, that's from 5,000 in December. We then crossed the threshold of 20,000 in July, which is, it just means that we've got people who are listening, people who like the show, people who are telling other people about it. And if you can do one thing for me today, forget subscribing to the show. Tell another attorney about it. Turn somebody else onto the podcast. You could be helping them in a huge way. We're trying to bring you information that's going to change your life as a business owner, as a law firm owner. And the law firm has the ability to change the financial trajectory of your personal life, to make other things happen in your life that couldn't happen. So if you're struggling to see that happen for you, then you might want to jump on a coaching call with me. That's at profitwithlaw.com/free coaching, profitwithlaw.com/free coaching. Until next time, stay focused with your goals, and I will see you on Tuesday. Take care. Have you been enjoying the show? We sure hope so. To make sure you never miss an episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button in your podcast player app. Next week, we will be back with more valuable resources and ideas on how to break the mold and take your law firm to the next level.